If you're curious how I went from charging $200 a rendering to landing $15,000 Archviz projects, or you're thinking about starting your own freelance Archviz business, I share my exact business framework in this webinar: how I manage clients, avoid red flag situations, set expectations, price projects, all of it. It's the same system I use for my own business, and I've refined it over the years through a lot of trial and error, and I hope it helps you out. So let's get started. Yeah, so for those that are here, thank you so much for coming. This is great. So yeah, this is where the cool kids hang out. Yeah, some context behind all this. As you guys know, I recently launched the Archviz Academy, and a lot of the audience, especially the YouTube audience, has been asking for, more like business content, because the Academy covers all these different things. But some people were like, hey, is there like something just focused on business that I could use as an introduction? And that's why we started, more business lectures on YouTube, as well as this webinar, just to kind of answer everyone's business questions, and for me to kind of talk about my process, how I run my side business and everything, through freelancing. So you guys can always ask questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring it. We have Damien from the team who's also going to be monitoring and dropping awesome, useful links in there. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into this. So this webinar, we're calling the Archviz Business Blueprint. This is literally everything I use, how I run my business, especially the logic and the strategy behind all this, kind of the systems I use, things I pay attention to, and just like my day-to-day, how I get all this stuff done. Okay, so basically in this webinar, we're going to be covering the following. I'm going to do a brief little introduction if you don't know who I am, and then we're going to talk about my business framework, how I manage multiple clients smoothly, red flags I see early on when it comes to negotiations, some proposal language. Again, this is all business oriented for you guys. And then how to make money and price your services properly, the benefits of real-time rendering. I'll talk a little bit about what we're calling the Archviz Business Kit and the Archviz Academy, if you're not familiar with that. And then I'm opening up the floor for a final Q&A. And this is a huge thing, whenever I say something and I'm like talking about this, feel free to drop a comment in there or in the chat, and I can look at it. That way it's a little bit more engaging, and that way we don't have to like go through everything and you have to like hold on to that question. It's totally fine if you have a question. So awesome. Yeah, and we're getting questions already. So yeah, Erica, I'm going to answer this. I have a whole section about like finding clients. Yeah, that's great. And I'll talk about how I handle that. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like if I have a slide up and there's interesting information about it and you want more info, just drop the chat in there. I'm going to try and monitor it. All right. So let's do a little intro. If you don't know who I am, my name is Andy Cristoforo, and I recently launched the Archviz Academy. I have 15 years of experience in the Archviz industry. I'm also a licensed architect, and I feel like having that background made this possible. I've worked on like every single project imaginable on the world of architecture, as well as Archviz. And I feel like when I started doing all this, when I started learning a long time ago, there was like no good way to learn everything in one spot. So it's kind of become my life goal now to kind of educate everyone. And that was the creation of the YouTube channel as well as the Academy. So what this really comes down to is like when we think about the business of Archviz, because at the end of the day, I know Archviz is a lot of fun and it's like a passion project, but at some point you're going to monetize it, right? That's kind of why we do all of our hobbies, and we try to make them full-time work or even freelance work. So really, what is the point of Archviz? At the end of the day, we have to, and this is the lens we need to see all this through. We have to remember that Archviz, in a way, it's marketing, but it's also a way to convey design intent, especially to those who can't read 2D drawings or understand the full picture. As projects get larger and more complex, it's impossible for someone to actually understand what that project will look like. So that's where Archviz is like really special, because in a way we're almost able to like show the future, like this is what it's going to look like. And there's a lot of value in trying to convey what something will look like before it's built, especially like in the world of real estate and architecture. You're selling something. So really the job as the Archviz artist is to make sure the project looks good, you're making your client look good, and that's something we always have to remember. So let's get into the business stuff. And all this came from the Archviz Academy. I just want to talk briefly about it. The business stuff is like one small module of the whole academy. The academy, I go through all these different lectures, all these different topics. I'm not going to go through each of them, but my goal is to teach you the foundations, technical D5 skills, AI, how to get clients. And we're literally just covering like a small little piece of it. Like I was saying earlier, just to give people a taste of what we offer. But what's great about it is you get instant contact to me and the community. It's a growing community and it's awesome. I've got some of the Academy members in the chat as well. Thank you for attending, but it's become like a really special, awesome place. So this is all business oriented, but again, the Academy is everything related to Archviz. So let's talk a little bit about the business side and projects. And recently I read a fantastic, or actually a couple of years ago, I read a fantastic book called The E-Myth Revisited. And I feel like it painted such a fantastic light in the world of small business and like freelancing. Because I feel like everyone, gets really good at something and then you start freelancing. And to kind of paraphrase, it's the whole E-Myth is if you're good at technical work, you'll be good at the business. And the whole point of it is this is actually the E-myth. So think about your day job. Like you're really good at this one thing, your boss is annoying or something. You're like, oh, I could easily do this. And like the whole point of this is that's actually not the whole point of business. Just because you're good at the thing does not mean you're good at business. Okay. Like keep that in there. That kind of like opened my eyes to this. So what does that kind of mean? In the world of business, or when you're doing your solopreneur, starting out, you actually have these three different hats you have to wear. You're essentially the entrepreneur, the guy who has to come up with ideas to innovate. You also have to be the manager to organize all your projects, make sure things are running well. And then you have to be the technician. So the people who are really good at the work, we are technicians and we think we can run a business because we are a technician. And that's like an important thing for you to know. It's not just about being good at the work or the job, right? That's actually a small piece of the whole pie. And that's something I feel like a lot of people don't realize when you go from, working your day job to like trying to do something on the side or even make it a full-time, freelance thing. There's so many different things you need to worry about. So just to kind of think about it is like, if you're doing this on the side, you're trying to fill these three roles, right? So there's the technician part, you're doing all the 3D modeling, the rendering, the technical tasks. Then there's the entrepreneur side. It's like, the business growth and the innovation, how do you stand out? And then there's the management side. So dealing with your clients, project coordination, and if you have a small team oversight. And that's a lot for like one person to handle. And I learned that, kind of the hard way. I thought I was a really, really good technician. Once I started getting into this, I realized, okay, I actually don't know a lot about business, and that's something I have to work on or find somebody who knows how to work on that. So this is the issue is that the technician, your time is always stuck doing the work, which isn't a bad thing. But if you want to scale, and that's really where the money is, you need to kind of figure out how do you break that that habit of like you're getting paid for your time. And I talk about this later about how to price your projects and everything. But if you're always billing hourly and you're doing the work, you're not really growing because your time has to be used for that project. So see a little question coming in. Yeah, totally agree, Carnier. Burnout is huge. Yeah, especially if it's you doing all these all these projects. Like if you have multiple projects, do you know how stressful that is? It's like you've got to deal with the emails, the client relations, the meetings, and just like you're just turning this wheel almost like a hamster, right? And you're not doing anything beyond that. And that's why people get stuck in technician mode. And everyone has to start there. That's just the reality. But I'm hoping with what I'm saying here, a little light bulb clicks like, oh, okay, maybe there's a better way of doing this. So, literally to Carnier's point, when you're trying to do all this, you're going to lead to burnout. It will hit you at some point, and you're going to have to start cutting corners, right? So lower quality deliverables, and you're just not going to scale or grow. And that's the issue I see a lot of freelancers go through, especially the people on Fiverr. And we'll talk about like Fiverr and Upwork. It's like I feel like it's caused so much damage to our industry, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you want to avoid getting in this loop where you finish a project, you hop to the next, and there's just no growth, no looking forward. So really, the book, the E Myth that we were talking about earlier, and it sounds so silly, but it's like you can delegate. There's nothing wrong with delegating the parts you don't want to do or the things you need somebody else to worry about, right? So delegation literally means like bringing on the people you need to handle specific work. That way, you don't need to worry about all those three hats because those three hats are critical. So this could literally be, somebody who can help on the modeling side or the marketing side or sales side or project management side, right? There's a bunch of different ideas. So the key takeaway here is like you don't want to just be working in the business, you need to be working on it, right? The business as a whole because you don't want to just be in that hamster wheel. I know I keep saying that, but like this is the thing you need to think about. Scale, 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 and this is one of the reasons why software companies make so much money because they have scale. They break the hourly rate from massive amount of work, right? So, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but the idea of systems. So in the world of Archviz, systems could be templates, it could be asset libraries, it can be anything where you can give someone else who's not you the things they need to be successful. Okay. So you need to think about not like the day-to-day work, but like how to run it for multiple people. So there's this concept about like franchising, right? Like think about McDonald's, right? Regardless of which location you go to, their burgers, their fries, their chicken nuggets all taste the same, right? That's because of the systems. Okay. So the idea is you can have people from all over the world, different countries, doing the same amount or the same work, but it seems like it's coming from the same, restaurant or business. And that's so important. And even within, if you have an office job, you should probably have some sort of standards, right? That's the whole point of standards. So it doesn't look like there's 20 different people working on it. It's like one firm. All right. So you need to think big picture. So these repeatable systems, again, like the marketing. So we're talking about like simple templates. It could be your typical Instagram post or your typical YouTube thumbnail, some sort of system. And then document your whole process, like everything you've learned, lessons learned. That's a huge one, especially in the world of architecture. What went well, what didn't go well. Because if you're not learning from this, you're not going to be improving and you're going to get stuck in this hamster wheel. Like you need to kind of get out of the work for a bit just so you can think big picture. And like any firm, you're going to have some sort of SOP, standard operating procedure. It doesn't have to be super like serious and like fancy, but when it comes to, a project, an Archviz project, from the time you book a client to when you execute it, there should be some sort of repeatable, simple system. Like this is the checklist. This is why checklists exist. Like I don't think people like realize like this is why when you go to an office and they're like, "Hey, this is how you do things." It's so again, you can have all these different people working on the same type of work, but it looks like it's the same firm company. And then obviously, when you're doing all this, like, what is the point of your freelance business? Like, what is your aim, right? What is your purpose? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to, gain notoriety, become a better artist? Like, you have to have some sort of focus when you do all this, or then it's not going to go anywhere. And I've tutored and I've mentored so many people, and the hamster wheel. I keep saying it, it's just something they never break out of and they just don't realize like I don't know what I'm doing wrong. It's because you're not innovating. Okay. So, to kind of sit on this point of the SOPs and everything, you could really take everything related to the world of ArcViz and systematize it, right? So you could have, you know, someone who handles the 3D modeling, the rendering, the PM, the marketing, right? And you're probably like, oh, well, how do I pay these people? Well, you know, I'm not saying day one you're going to be doing this, but at some point when you start, reaching that point where you're like, I cannot handle this many projects, you need to give something up. Okay. You need to hire someone somewhere. And if you're really, really bad at marketing, work something out with a salesperson. It can be commission based. You don't need to, give them a hardcore salary. It's like, hey, you're bringing work. This is what it costs. Same thing with 3D modeling and renders. Like there are so many people out there that know how to model really well. That might be a better modeler than you. And it's kind of like an ego thing. It's okay to give up that work as long as you have standards as to what the model should look like and how they should be prepared for rendering. It's okay. And what I've learned all my years of business is like Nobody, client wise, nobody cares if I was the guy in SketchUp who like picked the special like toilet or like modeled the trim. They actually pay me for my eye and the curation. That's really what someone's hiring you for. It's the value you're bringing to the image. They don't really care about the foundation. They just want the pretty picture. Okay? That's harsh truth, harsh reality. It's like 3D modeling is a lot of fun. I get it. But if you don't like it, you don't need to do it. Okay? So just put that in there. So I want to talk about, my own project workflow, and kind of how all my systems tap into this. So first, there's always client profiling and client acquisition. And I'll talk about, where these clients are coming from, what I've always found works best. But this is like such a big, this is literally the foundation of everything. If you have a good client, you'll have a good project. If you have a really bad client, it's just going to be a headache. You're not going to want to do the work. And profiling is so important. This is like the researching, making sure they're normal and not crazy, because that leads into the red flags, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But once we get the client, everything's good, the proposal and contract. Yes, in Archviz, you should have some sort of contract or proposal. And I will argue you do not need a 10-page proposal or contract. And I'll show you examples of mine. I can literally get away with one or two contracts. My wife happens to be an attorney, so we've like we've simplified it as simple as possible, because the reality is nobody really reads anything until a huge issue comes up. And so when you show somebody like this really extensive or intensive document, they kind of get freaked out, and you don't want to scare away potential clients. Obviously, have the language in there to, CYA. Um, very, very important, but you don't need to go overkill. We're making images, and I don't want to like, downplay what we do, but it's very different from the world of like, architecture or engineering where people's lives are at hand. Like if we do something incorrectly, it's not the end of the world. We can easily fix it. It takes us, a couple minutes to swap out a model. If we do something wrong in the world of engineering, buildings fall down, the health and safety of people, that kind of happens. Um, yeah, so Carnier's asking, online contracts rarely follow, online clients rarely follow contract. How do you manage that aspect? Well, that's interesting. I don't know about rarely follow contracts. I guess it depends on the type of language we're talking about and like what is the reason they're not following it. Is there specific terms that probably aren't good or favorable to them? I mean, this whole phase of proposals and contracts, this is really where both parties have to agree to this. And if they're not following it, then there should be some sort of repercussions. And the issue, and to your point, is in a global market, it definitely is challenging. If I've got somebody, a client in Europe and I'm in the States, there's really no good way to kind of like enforce that and you know, sue them. I mean, it is possible, but it's so difficult and it's usually like not worth it in that case. But that's really where the profiling is so important and like detecting the red flags early on. And we'll talk about that more in the next couple slides. But yeah, it's the contracting stuff is really tough. I'd be curious to see like what kind of terms you're talking about that aren't enforceable, um, that you're seeing issues with. But yeah, absolutely. Agreed, Sonda. So then once we get the proposal and contract, we move into approval and you should have signatures, you should have all those documents there. Like you should also go through it simple and easy to read. Like don't go crazy. Don't go into ChatGPT and say like, "Hey, give me like a hardcore contract." Nobody's going to read it or understand it, and then when it's time to actually enforce it, there's a misunderstanding. So spend the time there. And this is one of those things. It's like I deal with a lot of repeat clients. So you do it once at the beginning of the relationship. You make sure you're vetting them that they're solid. I mean, this is all prospecting. After that, it's not something you have to do every time. It's a typical thing. So then, working through project delivery, working on the actual project, and that, in my opinion, like it sounds like it's a big thing in our world, but it's actually just such a small piece of the overall workflow. Oops, that's weird. Okay. And then everyone's favorite part, the markups and revisions. And we'll talk a little bit about some contract language there, but this is what kills everyone. And this is what everyone's like so worried about in the world of ArchViz, because architects, I know, I'm an architect. We're picky as hell. We're annoying to work with. I know. And this is where the proposal stuff is really important. And little tidbit of advice here. I've always I always have a contract clause about like, hey, we've got like three material edits in an image built in. I always make sure I build it in, and then we switch hourly. And then every time I give the material delivery, like, hey, this is material option one, material option two, three. After that, I go, we're switching to hourly. I make sure that's very clear. And then once you say, hey, we're going to switch to hourly and it's going to cost them more money, it usually stops. So keep that in mind. So final payment, and we'll talk about how to get paid. But I feel like people are so bad about the accounting, and this goes back to the three roles, right? This is the management role. Like you need to be on top of this. You need some sort of system. It could be something simple like QuickBooks that sends automatic reminders so you can get paid. You need to make this as easy as possible. When I first started, I didn't want to bother with e-invoicing. I don't know why. It was like a silly thing, and we always dealt with checks. Checks take forever to deliver. They would get lost, or something happens and it has to get voided. Make it as frictionless as possible. Okay. And the next important thing is the work you're doing, always make sure you can use it for your portfolio. So make sure, the copyright or the actual confidentiality clause has been lifted so you can use it for portfolio. And then after that, make sure you're getting some sort of feedback. Testimonials go such a long way. You think about when you're ordering something from Amazon and you're reading reviews, like that's so important. And it takes them no time at all. Like just say like, hey, what did you think of this? It doesn't need to be anything formal. And I think that's something a lot of people, and maybe it's, I see it a lot for non-English native speakers where it comes off very formally, like, hey, can you like fill this out? Or it's not casual enough. And the client kind of gets like, I don't know, scared about, writing all this stuff. Just keep it simple and casual and then list that on your site, or when you're prospecting and you're pitching, it's something you can bring up like, hey, these are our satisfied clients. Yeah, so Demas is asking how many changes, how to handle that. This is what I was saying about having your revision clause built in about something with material edits and then threatening hourly. That's always helps. And then the reality is, if you're getting paid hourly for the material changes or model changes, who cares? You're getting paid for that. So there needs to be some sort of hard line of like, this is it. And you need to be clear, like, this is what I'm sending. This is our first round. This is our second round. This is our third round. And now after this, it'll be hourly. Like you have to be so clear in your communication. So some of you already have this. This is the Archviz business kit, but looking at my workflow, I was like, okay, how do I tackle all these? Like, where are these systems that I was talking about earlier? So we created proposal templates, email templates, portfolio and website templates, our project management template that we use in Notion to manage all of our jobs, and a pricing calculator. And this is basically dropped in at every single point. So we can, work effectively, and we have this that I can just give to somebody else. Like, hey, I need you to write me some proposals. They see my typical language, what is already vetted. So this is great. Damien's probably going to drop a link in a second. If you don't have this, if you're already part of the academy, you already have this. But take the time to like, either use mine or think about it for your own business. But I did this to save you guys time. Anyways, this is kind of how this fits in, right? We've got the email templates for the profiling and acquisition. So the profiling, this, you need to make sure that the work that company does aligns with the work you do. Okay. Like if you are starting out, right? This is like day one, you want to make some money freelancing. It's going to be really difficult for you to go after like really large projects. It's going to take some time for you to kind of build up your portfolio, build up your, your own specialty, get the quality there. And I'll talk about the different tiers of clients, but you need to have good emails. And one thing I'll say when it comes to the emails, and cold emails, they're still effective, still in 2025. They need, okay, you need to spend the time to write unique emails. Okay. I hate nothing more than getting like an email from someone, because I get bombarded by renders all the time where they like use the wrong name and they spend, 3 paragraphs talking about them. And I don't I don't want to say I don't care, but like as the client, what are you giving me, right? That's the hat you guys need to put on. Like what are you providing to them? Like right off the bat, keep it simple. What are you giving me? Sell it. Like quick. I don't care about how long you've been in business or like all the awards or whatever. I don't care. Just give me what you can do. And when I said, make it unique, per project, Like you should say like, hey, I saw this recent project of yours, looks great. This is actually something I specialize in, and I think we can improve, you know, your marketing in this way. Because again, ArcViz is marketing. So again, keep it simple. Don't go too crazy. So let's see what the chat's saying. So yeah, relate to current. One thing that's been an issue with client board is getting paid on time. Yeah. So Shara, yeah, I'll talk about that in the getting paid phase. I've got some ideas there. Hardest thing is actually finding the client and the rest is management. I think attracting clients when you're first starting out is hell. Yeah. Yeah, Erica, it's definitely difficult. And in my opinion, when I was first starting out, what worked really well was I would bring I always worked in small firms just because I did like, you know, residential and that kind of scale. And these firms, there was like small shops, they never did ArcViz, right? They didn't even know what like 3D modeling was. Like there's still a good deal of the population out there that they can see a simple SketchUp model. I'm not talking about rendered, like a simple SketchUp model, and like their mind is blown. Like I know we're like in this world of ArcViz and like we're used to the cutting edge and the stunning visuals, but we're like I like to say like we're not the normal people. Like you have to think about the masses where there's still so many people that are like, oh my God, a 3D model, like you can do this, is amazing. Like that still happens to this day. Like that's crazy. So what I was able to do at these smaller firms is like use those projects as like test beds and to build up my portfolio. And then you even have like friends and family. Like literally my first job that I ever did ArcViz wise was like building a deck for my father-in-law. We rendered it and everything, and then I used that to get like one of my first internships. Like, hey, I know how to do this, and like, oh, that's a cool thing we could bring. So it definitely is difficult. I totally understand, but you need to either create like sample projects that you can render, and that's why like my YouTube channel always has like, hey, follow along SketchUp models. Like use that in your portfolio. Like even if you didn't hire that client, nobody's gonna know. And it's like it's a white little lie. It's like, hey, this is what I'm capable of. They care more about that than, you know, did you actually do this? As long as you did the work, that's totally fine. So yeah, exactly. Sanda, I totally agree. Like Revit model with good shadows. Like it's we have to remember like we are in the like top 1% in terms of like knowledge of this stuff existing, right? It sounds crazy, but that's the reality. Like there's so many people that don't even know this is a thing. And then you go into like specialized things like animations and VR and then it blows people's minds, right? So so yeah, the ArcViz Business Kit, if you don't have it, highly recommend it. We lowered the price point so it's super affordable. But the idea is you should, even if you don't use mine, have some sort of template for your proposals and contracts. So it's simple, it's consistent, and you don't need to get confused with different like versions or anything. Like this is the version, and just keep refining it and making it better. Every time you do a project, you should improve in some way, whether that's like your quality or your marketing or something, right? There should be something you should focus on. And then we'll talk a little bit about the project management template, but I'm a big fan of Notion. I don't know if you guys use Notion, but this is a lifesaver. Like I use Notion for basically everything. Anything when it comes to like knowledge keeping or like just databasing. Notion's great. And I'll show you an image of how I use the project template there. Without it, I wouldn't be able to handle this because this is able to contain like the project name, invoice numbers, which is really important. How much I've been paid, did I invoice, right? Because that's a whole nother thing. And then my project calculator. This is just like a fancy thing we've developed for me to easily figure out and quote projects. I feel like I'm quoting projects all the time. Like in terms of the roles right now, I'm in the management role, and entrepreneur role where I'm just making sure, you know, we're getting the projects in, the money in, and that we're actually getting paid and making money on the jobs. So let's see. So So PJ, I'm still surprised when I work with clients on a Zoom call and I have a basic model of their house open in SketchUp and I just navigate around and they tell me they feel like Pixar's working on their stuff. Yeah, PJ, exactly. That's literally what I'm talking about. Like they're especially homeowners. It's so funny, and that's actually like one of the reasons why I always got into ArcViz because I love like helping people like with their house. Like their house is like a big deal. Like this is their first time they're able to like do a renovation. So for them to see it before construction, it's kind of like a magical thing. So I've always loved that. So yeah, don't feel like you need to like be crazy intense and good. And I'll talk about that later on. It's there's still so many people out there that are just amazed that 3D exists. And then the portfolio. Talk about this in a little bit, but this is hot take. When you prospect or you're pitching to somebody, just include the damn portfolio in your message, because it doesn't make sense for you to just say like, oh hey, are you interested? Just send the information over. It just saves a step. Like, what are you hiding in there? Just put all the information, the pricing, the projects you've done, have that all in there. I've got a good Q&A. All software needed for it and what can be done with it. It's so many 3D needs. Games. So Matthew, not sure I understand also. So when we talk about like the software needed for Archviz, I think that's what you're talking about. There's a couple things you could use. I'm a big fan of D5 Render. For those who follow the channel, I think it's the best real-time render engine. And I could talk about all day why that is. But you do need some sort of 3D modeler. That could be SketchUp or Rhino or 3ds Max. I love SketchUp. I've been using it forever. I just think it's simple, it's brilliant, and it can be as complicated as you need it to be. Like I, in an alternate universe, I'd love to get really, really good at Blender and really, really good at 3ds Max, but it's just like I can do everything I need in SketchUp, and I don't know. I hate using 3ds Max. Sorry. um, so so yeah, a couple tools you could use there. So the Notion project management template, and like it's not anything mind blowing. It's just like it's something that I've been using for so many years, and I was like, okay, well, let's just include it in the business kit. But how it's broken down is like I've got all the projects I'm working on, the client, and it's just a simple drop down, the priority, so I can tell the team like, hey, this is first, that's second, the job status, and like payment status. This is like really why I need it because I've got so many projects in different phases. I don't know or remember because now I'm like a dad of two kids and I've got so many things going on. I can't remember anything. So this is literally my second brain, and I'm sure you've heard the, like second brain systems. That's something you should definitely look into. But like use Notion or whatever. I don't care. Just like dump all that knowledge in there, and think about what else you could add. This is like my starting template. I've been using it for years. I think it's great. Like how I use it is I need to basically see like, hey, are we still quoting this? Have we paid? Have we been paid? Is it a partial payment? Do I need to invoice? And what is the invoice number? This happens all the time around like the end of the year or beginning of the year when people are getting ready for accounting. There's always a couple of times where a client's like, hey, I gave you this much money. I don't remember why. And then I can either find it via the number or the invoice number because I have it tied to their project. And then I always have like a little due date calculator that tells me how many days I have left. And it's kind of clever because based on how much they've paid and the total project fee, it'll tell you how much is left. Partial payments come up a lot, and someone was asking this before. How I work, I always get a 50% retainer, no matter what I do. If I'm really, really good friends with the client, or like we've been working together for so long, and the project's quick, I usually just do one payment at the end because there's trust there. If you do not trust the person and you've never worked with them, always do a 50%. Okay. There's been a couple times, thankfully, I can count on less than one hand, that I got my 50% retainer. We started working together, and then the client just disappears. Who knows? They get busy. They contact me a year later and they're like, hey, this project just like died off. Sorry. The 50% is there to protect any time in the initial, you know, uh, work of the project. So don't deliver everything and then get payment unless you're, very confident and comfortable with them. Um, there are ways to get people to pay you faster. You can always, and this comes in like QuickBooks or like Wave, where if they pay ahead, you can basically give them a discount. Um, Depending on like who the client is, they might like that. I try not to do it because personally, I only really like working with people I know or that are recommended to me. I think earlier on I was taking work from like anyone and I was getting like really, really frustrated because there's like a lot of nutcases. And then once you kind of like get into this rhythm where you've got like a nice portfolio, people are like recommending you, you start getting normal people. I think once you start like marketing to the world, it gets a little trickier and you just don't know what's gonna walk through the door. But anyways, this project management template, again, it's part of the Archviz business kit as well as the academy. This has got everything. It's got like my templates and everything. I use it all the time. It's phenomenal. But let's talk a little bit about finding clients. And this is going to be a little lengthy and controversial. Agreed, Bashar. SketchUp in D5, my favorite. Yeah. Okay. So some of this is going to sound obvious, but trust me, I have logic behind all this. So where to find clients, and this could be a whole webinar in itself, but this is what I found. There's different tiers of all these firms, especially architecture firms, and I'll talk about the tiers in a moment. But you need to figure out what work you're comfortable with taking in and like what your knowledge base is. Okay. Like if you only have done residential, switching to commercial might be a little difficult. If you're an architect and that you have training in that, that's fine. But you need to be comfortable with that. Or like going from just interiors to like exteriors of skyscrapers, that's where you need to like pay attention, right? Be sure you're comfortable with that and you have a portfolio to back that up. And that's another thing that drives me nuts about these cold calls I get from people. They send me, my day job, we work on like beautiful skyscrapers. Like don't send me like a one family house, although I love it, but it doesn't appeal to leadership because they're like, What's the relationship here?" So when you're reaching out to these firms, make sure your portfolio reflects that. And yes, you should have multiple portfolios. Hey, this is our interior design portfolio. This is our architecture portfolio. This is our engineering portfolio. Yes, you should have that. You could do, a mix and match where you've got all the different types of work in one portfolio, but it's not going to resonate as well. Okay. Like I know it sucks to do the extra work, but that's honestly, this is the business side of things. If you don't want to do it, find a salesperson who will, right? But these are the top three that everyone knows in the world of Archviz. But again, pay attention to the different tiers. Is it a small firm, medium firm, large firm, and the type of work they do? Okay. Take the time before you send an email and understand the work they do, and even put that in the email that like what type of work they do. They're like, hey, say like, hey, we do a lot of office work. I'm very familiar with your work, and like, I think we can make something work out here. Like, that's the stuff people want to hear. They don't want to hear like, oh, I started doing this in 2008, and I've won all these awards and blah blah blah. You could put like we've worked with these clients, and what I say by that is like, say you're targeting a larger architecture firm. If you name drop some of their competitors, they'll be like, okay, well, if our competitors are using this, they might be worth using. So think about that stuff. Home builders are really really good, and I feel like people don't I don't know, people sleep on them. So home builders, these are the actual contractors. If you can basically become friends with a contractor, they will give you so much work because they will introduce you to an architecture firm. Okay. A lot of these firms here all talk to each other. And so there's been times where I work for an architect, the contractor sees the work, and then I get called in there, or I work for an interior designer and the architect likes the work. So these are all intermingled, right? So it's not like you're just doing a project for one person. There's plenty of eyes that go on one project. So just remember that. Conferences, at least in New York, there are so many conferences going on all the time. When I first started my visualization business, we were really heavy in VR. It was, the cool thing at the time. And we got so much work from just going to, Javits Center for a day because we were some of the first people to be doing it in the area, and our quality was really nice. You see Archviz people at conferences all the time because who attends conferences? You've got your architects, your interior designers, your real estate agents. It's like they're coming to you, which is really, really nice. The only downside is it can be expensive, depending on, where it is. Another one that people don't appreciate, networking groups. I over my career, there were a couple times where we just joined some networking groups of, AEC companies. So, you've got a bunch of architects in there, you've got a bunch of interior designers, real estate agents. They figure out who you are, and they're like, hey, I met this guy a couple times. He seems good. Easy. Like you're just out there. Like it doesn't always need to be cold calls. Okay. Like you can go out. Yes, it does require going out. And if you don't want to go out, that's where salespeople come in. So things to look at. Um, First, when you're first starting out, your contacts are so important. Literally, I'm sure you've got like an aunt or a cousin or a sibling that needs something simple. Like start there, pretend like they're the client, right? Like treat them really well, document it, you know, use that as your portfolio. And word of mouth, this has literally been the strongest thing. Like these have been really important, but word of mouth, I feel like 99% of my work right now comes from word of mouth. Like they are happy with the job, they recommend me for another one, and that's just how we work. And I love that because these clients are usually normal because they're already vetted. Okay. It's like, when you first start dating and you want to be introduced to somebody like a friend of yours knows them, they're normal. That's the same thing. Okay. Another one that I've actually been kind of leaning more towards LinkedIn. I feel like when people message me on LinkedIn, I'm like, I don't know, 80% more likely to respond than an email. But again, it's the targeting. The targeting has to be so good. Like you're speaking to me, like it's a unique message. Okay. I keep saying that with the messaging. You need to spend the time. Like I'd rather you write 10 really good, unique emails than send out 100 boilerplate emails. Okay. And you'll see in like my email templates, I've got like highlights everywhere of where you should be changing depending on the type of project or person you're speaking to. Facebook, which I still can't believe is like still a thing, but old people who are usually the homeowners or architects or builders are still on it. So that's a fun one. Cold emailing, yeah, we talked about this. It still works, but again, you got to be personable and you got to have examples. Just put the examples in the original email. Okay, like don't make them have to follow up. Reduce friction as much as possible, because the idea is if you include a nice email with a portfolio and it resonates with them, they should just respond with, "Oh, that sounds great. This is the project I have. Could you quote it?" Like that's how your email should be structured to the point where it's just like, "Hey, send me something and then I can quote it." Again, remove friction as much as possible. And then my big one, I have a love-hate relationship with Upwork and Fiverr. I think the idea behind it is really good. I think the execution has completely like destroyed Archviz's pricing because you've got these people charging $10 a rendering and they don't look good. I've never seen somebody who charges like $10 or $20 a rendering and it looks good. It's just like I wish it would go away. Like you could ban Archviz there. And really the people, the clients you're going to meet there, you don't want someone who's charging you or paying you $10 a rendering. It's just it's not good for anybody. Like use all this. This is so bad. Amen to that. Agreed, PJ. It's so frustrating, so frustrating. And then the other thing I don't like is like the portfolio pieces look stunning, usually taken from like another another artist, or they spend a lot of time on that, and then you get something that looks horrible. Like nobody should be charging $10 a rendering. Okay, nobody. Okay, okay. So then, and I talked about this, but like what not to do. Um, the generic stuff, everyone's really good at like seeing right through a generic email, especially when like the wrong things are copied. Spend the time and customize the email. I'll say it again, but write 10 really good custom emails instead of 100. That's so much more effective. Your conversion rate's going to be so much higher. And get the portfolio in there, whether it's a link to your website or a PDF, get that in there. LinkedIn makes it really easy because you could just attach a PDF. Don't make them have to respond. I've never understood that logic. It's just like you're making it more difficult for them, and then the client has to wait for you to respond. Like just give them the information. Like what are you hiding? And desperation. What I mean by this is like don't follow up with me like 5 or 10 times. That just means you're not busy and like you've got a lot of time. Like one or two follow-ups, and then if they don't respond, that's it. Just get it. Like understand they're not interested. Okay. Okay. Oh, that's funny. Thanks, Luis. Luis understands. Yeah. Okay. So then this is the tier stuff that I was talking about. You've got small, mid, and high, and I want to go through this. So small clients, these are your freelancers, startups, solo architects. I love this group. The only issue is they do have tighter budgets, but in my opinion, I think with real-time rendering, you can actually make your pricing as adjustable as needed. But the reason you target small, and I'll even throw medium in here, is they typically don't have a Viz team and they usually need to outsource. And, the requirements aren't as intense as high tier firms. I feel like to reach like the really, really, top 10 firms in the world, you need to be like incredible. Like you have to be quick. You have to be like affordable. You have to make beautiful images, which is really difficult. I think anyone, if you're decent at rendering, can easily work with a small or middle shop, mid-sized shop. And this is what I was saying earlier. Like, if you find an architect in their 60s, because there's so many of them, like them just seeing renderings, it's just like wow, like, and they can offer it. And what I always say is like, and this is the real trick here, like let me be part of your contracts. Like in a way, there's a couple of residential firms I work with. The client doesn't know I exist. We just pretend like, hey, I'm their visualization team. I do all the renderings for them, all the modeling, and they just present to the client. And what the architect gets to do is they get to put 20, 30% on top of my fee, and that's just built into their contract. So instead of saying, oh, now you got to pay $2,000 for renderings, no, the client never sees that because it's built into the contract. Like that's the type of relationship you want and that you can get with a small and mid-size firm. The larger firms, usually the high tier, because of like the requirements, sometimes the clients do have marketing budgets and pay for it. This is really really difficult to get into. It can be done, but it's like really good and bad because I don't want to crap on any high tier firms, but there's a lot of like ego and design by committee stuff going on between the client and the designers. So it's really really tough to work in this realm. The small and middle realm, I feel like really, really sweet spot, really nice sweet spot. As long as your work and you're comfortable with their type of portfolio, I think it's perfect. All right, so some red flags I want to get through. When it comes to like the whole negotiation part of your contracts, if they say any of these things, like they just don't know why you cost this much, or like, I know somebody who could do it for so much cheaper, or they're just like really rude all the time. Just walk away. Just say like, we're not a good fit. Like for your sanity, you don't need to put up with this. Like you don't need to say yes to everything. Like if you get into the world of like, business and productivity, that's like something everyone talks about. You don't need to say yes to everything. Like if you're really, really desperate, up to you, but it's okay to just be like, we're not a good fit, right? So then the other thing is scope creep. This is something that you guys need to like nail down, and this comes back in the contracts, but you need to put your foot down when it comes to scope creep. And that's basically like, oh, we agreed on 3 renderings. They're trying to make you do 2 more for the same price. Like that's where Archviz artists lose a lot of money. So pay attention to that. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about proposal building. And just my logic on all this. I feel like a lot of people starting out in the world of ArcViz want to be the best visualizer, and you spend all your time on the technical skills, like, oh, I need to reach photorealism. And the reality is, like, you can get to 80% of photorealism, and that's good for like so many people. The final like 100% or like the remaining 20%, that's usually the high tier people that demand the world, and they should be paying for that. But the small residential shops or like small commercial shops where it's not a big team, like they're used to just presenting like SketchUp models or like, Enscape or something. Like you can get away with not killing yourself over the photorealism stuff. That's you spend so much time here and it's not worth it. If the budget's there, then totally. But like if you're trying to deliver on your promise of your quality as well as the time, it's usually not worth it. So when it comes to proposals, this is what I usually do, and this is I think a 1 or 2 page proposal. We keep it super quick. We talk about who the client is, what they want. This is basically just a double check. Like, are we talking about the same thing? Like, we're not talking about animations. We're not talking about like VR. We're just talking about renderings. Timeline, that always comes up. And I always include revisions may alter this estimate, because what happens is you start working on it, you get comments from the client, and things take longer. And then I do a breakdown of the views. And I usually break this out into the type of view. So aerial gets its one category, interior gets its own, and then exterior gets its own category. And then there's basically options. So here we did like an aerial option with drone view or without drone view. If you guys have ever done aerials, you guys know how difficult it is to like build up the context and all that. And then we usually keep some terms at the bottom, like, are we getting a model? Do we have to make a model? The look and feels, what is the hourly rate and all that. And we always talk about the 50% upfront, 50% at the end. And this is all e-invoice. And we always include samples. And we do this because we want to make sure that there's no situation where we deliver renderings and they're like, oh, I saw some stuff on your site and it looked so much better than this. What's the deal there? We always like to keep a couple samples in there, or, whether this is part of the initial outreach, just so they're familiar with your work quality. I think that's really important. Otherwise, they're like, this doesn't feel right. And this is my issue with Fiverr, where it's like you see these pretty images up front and then you get something that's not that. So keep it honest with your samples. Let me look at the chats here. All right, let's see. Next one. So this is another type of format I do. I do a lot of like healthcare work, and the healthcare work was actually word of mouth. It was basically we worked with an architect. They started working with a hospital, and then the hospital was like, "Hey, we'll just give you the visualization work because we're happy with that architect's work." So I wound up doing the visualization for any architect doing that hospital's work, which is fantastic. But something I recommend, again, breaking out the exterior or interior scope, all the rooms, right? It's basically like reiterating your initial conversation, and plans. I feel like plans are really useful. This room, this space, it's difficult to see, but there were like 5 exam rooms. So which exam rooms? So like we literally just sit there on a Zoom, just mark it up and we make sure it's the right scope. And then we just talk about the phases, depending on the type of project. It could just be 1 phase, 2 phase, 3 phase. This one, we just did a geometry check for phase 1. So that's a clay weight foam core model. That way they could just look at it. Is everything in the right spot? And then we do, draft views. So instead of rendering out at like 4K or 6K, we do like, 1K, something quick. And then phase 3 is final high quality images. And that's usually where the final payment comes. But if I only get paid for the first 50 half, at least it's like most of my work is covered, right? So always be clear about how many revisions, what the rooms are, the scope. Scope is so important. And just use simple language. Like you can read this here. There's a good rule of thumb that your writing should be about like 6th grade to 8th grade writing. You don't want to be too complicated because people just won't read it or understand it. And then, make sure your payment terms are clear. This client, because they're a large corporation, they only dealt with net 60, which is really frustrating, and checks, which sucks. But it's always good to confirm with them how they usually pay out. Usually for the smaller companies, the e-invoice is totally fine. They open it up, they can pay with credit card, it's ready to go. Larger companies, because they're so large, they're like, hey, this is our SOP. Like we can't deviate from that. Which, in that case, whatever, it's worth it. So the revisions, and you guys were asking about this before. This is my typical kind of like layout. 3 rounds of material edits. Material, not geometry. So if we're saying, hey, we're doing a kitchen, we have this white oak, material in the cabinets. Okay, now we want to see it in white. Now we want to see it in dark. That's a material edit. And then when that email goes out, hey, this is your first round of material revisions. This is your second round, third round. If there are minor tweaks, like, oh, I don't like the handles, can we swap it out with that? It's fine. I'm not gonna to fight someone to get you more money for this. You're never gonna win. Major geometry, that's a big difference. If we're talking about a cabinet scheme where it's a slab versus like the actual paneling, that's gonna take time. So again, you need to be clear with this. So have this in your proposals, and you don't want to fight with anyone on the money. It just gets ugly. It sours the relationship, and that's no good. So service pricing. This is a tough one. So when it comes to pricing, there's a couple different ways to figure out what your rates are. It really comes down to what is your market rate, right? Like what is it, what do people charge in New York or the United States or Europe, right? You got to do some shopping and research there. You have to factor in your own quality, and be honest. If you're not like the greatest visualizer, you're not going to be able to charge, $200 an hour or something, right? And then you should have some sort of price calculator. And like we built one, which is really handy, where you can basically plug in your hourly rate or somebody on your team's hourly rate. Let's say you've got somebody doing the modeling and rendering for you. You plug that in, your estimated hours, and really this comes from like doing this type of work so much. If you're branching into new work, let's say you're going from residential to office, you might not be too familiar. So pad it a little, not too crazy. And then in the world of business, you always need some sort of overhead and profit multiplier. That way you're covering, any contingencies, like let's say more meetings come up or more revisions come up, or, you just need to bake in profit. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about the hamster wheel, right? Like if you're just making your money and that just covers your time and you're not getting any money to just have the lights on or the software costs, you're going to be in a deficit. Okay. So we have this handy calculator, part of the Archviz business kit and the academy, but it makes it so simple. So if someone's like, "Hey, I need, this bathroom and a kitchen," I can say, "Okay, the kitchen it's going to be 5 hours, $100," and then I plug in my overhead, and there we go. So what I will say with the overhead, this guy, if I have a feeling they might be a pain in the butt to work with, I kind of go to the right. I'm gonna be honest there. If I know they're picky and you're working with high tier people, they kind of live here. If I'm working with like people I trust, I have a good working relationship with, I know how they are, we're in this realm. Okay. If it's also a different type of work, one family residential, the profit multiplier, it really can't be high just because of like how homeowners are and like mortgages and everything. They just like don't have the budgets. But if we're talking healthcare, these guys can easily crank to the right. No one bats an eye, right? Same thing with office. Real estate gets a little weird because developers are like the wealthiest and the cheapest people. So you need to kind of temper this. But again, this is things you need to practice with and, get a little conscious about typical rates. So what I use when it comes to payments, we use QuickBooks for e-invoicing. I don't love QuickBooks. I actually hate how much I have to pay them a year. If it were up to me, I'd start fresh with Wave. It's just like I've been using QuickBooks for like the past 10 years and it's just in my own ways there. I've got everything there. So it's really difficult to switch everything over. But we usually do, 50% e-invoice and then 100% e-invoice. And what we always say is like we don't start until we get paid for the 50%. Okay. We don't start. And I make that very clear. Like you pay us and then we get started. Usually do 7 days of 7 to 15 days due dates. Depending on the project and the client, it might be a month or 2 months, but I usually, for smaller projects, keep it a week. Because what happens with many people, we like to procrastinate. So they'll wait the 7 days and go, "Oh shit, I need to pay this." Or they'll wait 60 days and wait to the 59th day to pay. Like there's no benefit to waiting. They have the money. Like I never understood that. Like I don't know why, 1 month was always like a rule of thumb. No, we've been cranking that down to 7 days. No reason to be waiting for this. It's crazy. And then if you're waiting longer, it delays their project. So that's why I say we don't start until we get paid. Okay. All right. So you guys might be very familiar with this. This is the iron triangle. But basically, the point is there's three spheres, right? You've got the good sphere, fast, and cheap. And any overlap gives you this kind of condition. If you want fast and good, it's usually expensive. If you want good and cheap, usually slow. If you want fast and cheap, usually low quality. And here, this is my hot take here, but I feel like D5 render, real-time rendering, puts you in the sweet spot, which has always been deemed like not possible. And I say this because the quality is phenomenal. Once you have, your assets and you've templatized everything, right? It's very quick to build up a scene because think about it. I do a lot of residential work. It's like we always deal with the same paints or trim colors, right? We always deal with like the same window colors, the same cabinet materials. And we've done so many projects, we just have like 100 materials that we've pretty much use on every single project. Really, really rare these days that there's like a custom material. And because of this, you can kind of fit this sweet spot of like if you need to lower your fee for that job because, let's say it's a smaller firm or like a homeowner, it's easy to do and like it's not like it hurts you. I feel like in the days of like the people using like V-Ray and Corona, it's you don't really get the fast. And so you're kind of in this like it's either it's like expensive and slow. It's high quality but expensive and slow. Real time really puts you in a sweet spot here where you can do all this, where your renderings they look perfectly great, look beautiful. Depending on your speed, you could do it really quickly because the renderings come out in less than a couple minutes, right? So I really think we're onto something with real time rendering now. So just to kind of like recap everything we talked about, because I know we're coming up on time or we're over time, but really important you look at your business, come up with systems to make things, templatize or manage things easier. Pay attention to red flags, trust your gut on this. Clients are people too. If they seem weird, don't work with them. Make sure your proposals are padded with language to protect yourself, and make sure you're pricing yourself so you're getting some sort of profit. Use the calculator. And real time is the future. That's my opinion. I really don't see a world where like V-Ray and Corona, take over market share. I think real-time rendering has completely revolutionized how we render. So that's my recap there. I'll put this out there. If you are interested in like learning the whole world of like Archviz and like you want to continue learning with me because you like the way I talk, we're doing a special discount on the Archviz Academy. Usually the lifetime plan is 1,500. Here we've got it for 999. We even have a quarterly plan too. You can use Affirm, Klarna, all that stuff. And if you're really, really interested and you want to pull the trigger, we'll throw in a one-on-one feedback session. I'll meet with you, talk to you, and go over any of your issues. But I've got some great testimonials, people from the academy that have joined the chat. But yeah, drop your questions in here. I'll answer them. I hope you guys found this informative and useful. PJ, do you have any tips for those of us doing this as a side hustle in terms of a tactful way to let clients know that and it means you can't respond to request. Ah, yeah. So PJ, that's a great question. So literally, I deal with this all the time because like I have a full-time job. I'm also a dad, and I've been doing this on the side for ages. It's just like ArcViz, in my opinion, is just like such a fantastic way to like make extra cash and everything. And I think it's great. But yeah, it gets really difficult. I always tell my clients like early on, like this is what I'm doing. Like I let them know that I am not available like all the time. And emails are best. Emails are best because if I have, help, I can easily forward that email or screenshot it to, my colleagues that are handling like, 3D modeling or the rendering. I try to avoid Zoom calls and um, phone calls as much as possible because like I'm at the office. I can't be doing this. Like, and also for the record, like I think it's so inefficient to have a phone call to talk about visual stuff. The Zoom stuff, it's like, depending on who they are, maybe I'll take a Zoom on like a weekend or something with them because they're available. But I do tell them up front, like, hey, this is something I do on the side. I try my best to get back to you at a reasonable time, but I can't do those like, hey, I thought of something, I need a phone call right now. Like that's just not how I work. And that's why I do like working with people that are recommended to me, or like a reference instead of just like a stranger, because it gets a little harder there. Um, all right, so it says amazing, thank you. All right, PJ. Sometimes I work with a custom home builder and drawings renderer I do for him. His clients often are mostly to show design options and do not need to be polished final renderings. Things like moving, where windows are, what type. Okay. In the beginning stages, it's just screenshots from SketchUp, though once they lock in what they want, I will do polished D5 renders and on occasion animations or VR walkthroughs. Point being, showing a variety of design options is part of the appeal to clients. Do you have pricing scenarios? Pricing scenarios in the calculator. That's where I struggle. Though we're able to show them, it saves them time and money because we sort of build their house before we build it. Agreed. So PJ, in the overhead like slider that I use in the calculator, that literally like I know it's hard to see, but I built it for here we go. Right here. This is like contingencies. I should say options. But I will crank this to the right if I know I have options. And then hopefully in the beginning they tell me like, hey, we need like two options for this. That's the other thing. I try to get the scope figured out earlier on, but I do use that calculator. That's literally how I figure this stuff out. Or if I know ahead of time, I'll bump up my hourly time. So instead of 10 hours, it takes me 12 hours, so on. Okay, so let's see. What else? Thanks, Andy, for this amazing webinar. Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Damien. How do you get client and get how to get US client and get $2,000 work? Okay, so this is a big thing. And I was talking about this earlier, but for non-native English speakers, I think it's so important that maybe you use ChatGPT or something, but just to like clean up your emails and just like communication. Because I noticed that when you're spelling or like the email just sounds off, that kind of sets the stage for how your working relationship will be. Like if you're really hard to understand in email, right? And you're not able to communicate properly, that sets the stage for like how this project's going to go, where, you're not understanding, there's miscommunication. I think like it's a couple things. It's like you really need to understand English correctly. Sorry, that's like the reality because there's going to be miscommunications otherwise, and you just need to be like it's a good way of saying this. Like if you want to charge $2,000, your portfolio needs to reflect that. Like the bigger studios are charging 2 to 4,000, and that's because it shows there. Like you're never gonna charge that much with Enscape. Like that's reality. Like your portfolio and the way you present yourself and how you are needs to reflect that. I hope that makes sense. Everything about this experience resonates in my heart. I feel heard, and yeah, awesome. No problem. Yeah, all great questions. Is there anything else? Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming. We got some more questions. Yeah. Hey, Esteban. Hey. Yeah, no problem. Can I charge with D5 and SketchUp? Yeah, of course. This was outstanding. Definitely picking up your business kit. Yeah. Yeah, the business kit is great. So like, and maybe I didn't mention this before, but the business kit, the cool thing about it is like that's only like 5% of the Archviz Academy. Like if I were to just like go all the way, like if you thought this was valuable, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but like I did spend a lot of time on this academy and like figuring out the curriculum. But like this, everything we just talked about, this is one module of like the whole thing. And like I know, for any academy students, like, one through five right now have been released. And like I've seen such fantastic like images from people. The testimonies have been great, but everything about like how I work and like in my brain is in the academy. And we are doing, special pricing for today. But if you have any issues with the pricing or anything, do email me. We do want to work with you guys and try and figure this out. I'm gonna put my email in the chat. Even if you have questions and you want to learn more, just email me. Kind of like how we are right now is like we'd rather have more people in the academy learning instead of this just being like locked away. So feel free to shoot an email. Happy to work with you there. But yeah, this was great. I'm glad people find this useful because that's why we're doing this. Because I feel like everyone talks about like the D5 stuff, which is great. Nothing wrong with that, the technical stuff, but nobody talks about like how to run their business. And I feel like a lot of us, that's why we learn this archivist stuff, so we can make money. So I'm happy to talk about it. I wish more people would, but I guess I've got to be the one to do it, which is fine. It's all good. It's just something that's like been part of my DNA for like I don't know my whole professional career that I was just like why not share this? But anyways, this was great. Thank you everybody. Yeah, as always, feel free to email me. Make sure you check out my YouTube, check out the Academy. Yeah, I'm very very happy with how the Academy has been going. I love the community. I think the people in it are awesome. They've been growing. Washara's here. She's from the Academy. I've seen amazing growth there. She's awesome. But yeah, really really great. Yeah, no problem. All right, thank you everybody. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I hope to hear from you soon. And I hope you join the Academy. Um, yeah, Michael. Yeah, Michael. You're in the Academy. You can, or you're in the ABK. You can email me there. You can message me on Circle. So yeah, the whole community's hosted on Circle. Circle is really cool. Basically, we can host the course, and you've got like direct messaging. You've got like forum/discussion type of posts and everything. It's actually really, really neat and handy. Actually, if anyone is curious, I'll just show you because I've got nothing to hide, right? This is how it works. I'll show you inside Circle. So yeah, Circle is pretty cool. So this is Circle. So right now our Circle is built into two things. Basically we have the Academy, which comes, or it's basically like this, and then we have the Archviz Business Kit, which is just this. And like Archviz Business Kit, I think it's like a great value, but you're just getting a small part of it. I feel like all the fun stuff, like all these are like community posts. These are like people sharing my announcements and everything. Luca's doing an amazing job, following our videos and everything. You can get feedback. That's a huge part of the academy. So like you post your renderings and then I'll go in there, we'll mark it up, we'll talk about how to improve it, which is really awesome. And I go in there, I give great feedback and everything. Sometimes we mark it up. So this is kind of how it works. It's like I essentially your mentor. We kind of say it's like you're in college. It's a college course, and I'm the professor. You post any questions, any topic, any renderings, and I'm there. And we've got the whole academy here. And you could see like actually let me view it as a student so you could see. But if you go view course, yeah, you can see we've got, right now we have almost 8 hours of content released, and we're not even like halfway done releasing everything. So over 20 hours of content easily. But you can see I go through everything. Like it's crazy. And then we've got a bunch of the business stuff that was released right there. So really cool and awesome. Ricardo, yeah. Yeah, so either email us at info or Andy at Archviz Academy, totally fine. And then Damien just dropped in our special pricing link, which brings down that amount. So what that looks like, look at that. It brings you down from usually it's like an annual, but it's a lifetime fee. So you buy once and then you have it. And then you can use all these buy now, pay later services as needed, like Afterpay, Affirm, Klarna. And then if this is an issue, reach out. There's a lot of issues with currency and conversions and everything. So, we can definitely figure that out. That's not an issue. I'd rather, help than not. But overall, love Circle, love the community. It's been awesome. So again, thank you everybody who's been listening to me. If you have any questions, either email me, YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm here, and I really hope to see you in the academy. But thank you again, and we'll probably be posting a recording of this at some point. So stay tuned for that. See you everybody.